Hey everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan, and the podcast, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. That includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops, and also brought to you by Master Packager, an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. The US CISA has put out an urgent advisory about a recently disclosed Microsoft Exchange vulnerability, CVE-2025-53786, which is in hybrid Exchange deployments, and they warn that it allows a cyber attacker with administrative access to an on-premises Microsoft Exchange server to escalate privileges by exploiting vulnerable hybrid joint configurations. This vulnerability, if not addressed, could impact the identity integrity of an organization's Exchange Online service. At the time of this report, Microsoft has stated there is no observed exploitation as of the time of this alert publication. However, the CISA is strongly urging organizations to implement Microsoft's Exchange Server Hybrid Deployment Elevation of Privilege Vulnerability Guidance that Microsoft has published. And I think the urgency comes from what I see online, and thanks to the patch management mail group, is that an exploit was just shared at a Black Hat event. So there is an exploit out there. So once that's out in the ether, you can expect cyber gangs to start leveraging this pretty quickly. And I believe this was patched previously, so it's in the April 2025 Exchange Server hotfix updates. So you want to make sure that you're patched and up to date. Obviously, there's some enterprises that lag behind on their updates and their cadence is just off. This is one you should not sleep on, according to the US CISA. They also warn any organizations who are using public-facing versions of Exchange Server or SharePoint Server that have reached their end of life should disconnect these public-facing versions, as obviously they're not going to be patched. Microsoft's advisory provides some temporary enforcements for those who are unable to fully remediate at this time. And I'll share a link to the advisory, which contains links to all the resources you should need for this. And that will be with this episode, which is episode 398, and you'll find it at 5bytespodcast.com. In another security-related story, Adobe released emergency updates for 2 zero-day flaws in Adobe Experience Manager forums on JEE after a proof-of-concept exploit chain was disclosed that could be used for unauthenticated remote code execution on vulnerable instances. The flaws in this case are tracked as CVE-2025-54253 and CVE-2025-54254. With 54253, this is a misconfiguration allowing arbitrary code execution, and it's rated as 8.6 out of 10, which is quite high. And for 54254, this is improper restriction of XML external entity reference, allowing arbitrary file system read. And this one is rated as critical with a maximum severity score of 10 out of 10. The latter of the two, the one that is 10 out of 10, affects a web service that handles SOAP or SOAP authentication, and by submitting a specially crafted XML payload, attackers can trick the service into exposing local files such as Win10 without authentication. It is claimed that the researchers who discovered the vulnerability and the exploit had notified Adobe, but Adobe had not sufficiently responded within the typical 90-day timeline. So the researchers went ahead and published a technical write-up on July 29th detailing how the vulnerabilities work and how they can be exploited. So just like that previous story, this is one you won't want to sleep on. This one, it's 10 out of 10. It's as bad as it gets. Making system changes with unauthenticated access. Don't sleep on it. Patch, patch, patch. BleepyComputer.com reported another security-related story, albeit one that is a lot less worrying. They reported that the Zero Day Initiative is offering a $1 million reward to security researchers who will demonstrate a zero-click WhatsApp exploit at the upcoming Pwn to Own Ireland 2025 hacking contest. It's reported Meta, alongside Synology and QNAP, are co-sponsoring the competition, which will take place from October 21st to October 24th in Cork, Ireland. So from my Cork friends, they know that Cork is the real capital of Ireland. If you've never been and you're in InfoSec, you should take this opportunity. It's a really lovely city. And also get out to West Cork. It's one of the nicest parts of the country. But anyway, registration closes on October 16th at 5 p.m. Irish Standard Time, with the contest order being determined by random drawing. Another warning for those about a security breach. It's being reported by BelievingComputer.com. Those who donated through the Pi-hole website's donation form to support the development of the solution should beware that there has been a data leak which potentially exposed personal information that was visible to anyone who viewed the web page's source code due to a GiveWP plugin security flaw. The vulnerability stemmed from the GiveWP, which is a WordPress plugin used to process donations on the Pi-hole website. The plugin inadvertently made donor information publicly accessible without requiring authentication or special access privileges. It is believed it could impact almost 30,000 donors, with 73% of the exposed records already in Troy Hunt's database. So that's unfortunate. It sucks that, such a worthy cause, and they're relying on this plugin that should be secure for the donations, ends up biting them in the rear. I don't really blame them, and it just is what it is, I guess. NeoWin.net has reported that Windows 11 version 25H2, which is currently available for testing in the dev channel, appears to contain a change in the way that desktop shortcuts are handled. While Windows 11 version 25H2 and its redesigned start menu still allow you to create shortcuts by dragging apps from the menu to the desktop, the shortcuts properties dialog is now different. In Windows 11 24H2, you could right-click a shortcut and check the path to the file in the target box. In this new version in the dev channel, the box no longer shows the full path to the file. It does show application as the type in the dialog, which I believe, this isn't necessarily a different or brand new type of shortcut, but the difference seems to lie in the fact that it's creating this type of shortcut when you take the action of dragging, dropping from the menu to the desktop. It appears using the Send to Desktop right-click option continues to set the shortcuts the old-school way, so it has been suggested that maybe this behavior is a bug and it won't actually be reflected in the final release, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. NeoWin.net also reported that Microsoft has announced a major upcoming change to the infrastructure of private channels in Microsoft Teams. Private channels will use a group mailbox like shared channels rather than individual mailboxes going forward. This will result in the maximum private channels per team to jump from 30 to 1,000, and maximum members per channel to increase from 250 to 5,000. Additionally, meetings scheduling will be supported following this change, and compliance will be applicable at a group level rather than individuals. Microsoft has emphasized that this change will greatly benefit customers who have been requesting more flexibility and simplified compliance for private channels and teams. The infrastructure migration process is set to begin in late September 2025 and wrap up before 2026 begins. During this time, mailboxes will be gradually rolled over, but will continue to be accessible, so there should be no downtime. Microsoft has supplied some guidance documentation for administrators to consider for policy settings and that kind of jazz. The Verge has reported that Microsoft is ending support for Windows 11 SE next year, 5 years after it launched the operating system as a low-cost laptop-compatible edition, and it was designed originally to compete with Google Chromebooks. Windows 11 SE was only available on devices for education customers such as schools, and it was supposed to convince them not to switch to Chrome OS. It has been shared that support for Windows 11 SE, including software updates, technical assistance, and security fixes, will end in October 2026. DataCenterDynamics.com reported that AWS has achieved an annualized revenue run rate of more than $123 billion. And this was revealed by AWS CEO Andy Jassy on an earnings call for Q2 2025. The cloud unit saw a revenue of $30.9 billion for the quarter, up 17.5% year over year, and more than the previous quarter's $29.3 billion. However, while this positions AWS in the lead against competitors Microsoft and Google in terms of revenue, with the companies reporting $29.9 billion and $13.6 billion respectively, investors were quick to note that AWS's revenue growth rate was significantly lower. Google Cloud revenue has grown 32% year on year, while Microsoft was up 26%. So AWS still pretty dominant in the cloud, but you can see that Microsoft and Google are nipping at its heels. Also AWS related, AWS has announced AWS European Sovereign Cloud, which will be launched at the end of this year, and which they claim will be the only fully featured, independently operated sovereign cloud, backed by strong technical controls, sovereign assurances, and legal protections. It will have no critical dependencies on non-EU infrastructure, and the AWS European Sovereign Cloud is operated only by personnel who are European Union residents located in the EU and subject to EU law. So that's really interesting wording, I think. Fully featured, I'm guessing because some Azure services are not in every region and possibly not in the Azure sovereign EU cloud. But then also kind of the inference about EU employees only. And I would guess, I mean, it's not stated or inferred here, but some of the broader Microsoft infrastructure, even if you're using the EU sovereign cloud, may be serviced across their global Azure infrastructure, not specifically in the EU sovereign cloud. So it seems like a pretty indirect kind of poke in the eyes towards Microsoft on the way they worded that. And obviously, I think there's a pretty lucrative business for these cloud providers, for these EU sovereign clouds, given the current geopolitical situation. So, smart move to, one, create these, and also two, to start marketing yours as superior, because I think there's a whole lot of money. I mean, the EU is the largest trading bloc in the world, I believe. So it's going to be very lucrative business for whoever wins that. CNBC reported that Palo Alto Networks will take over the Israeli identity security provider company CyberArk in a deal valued at roughly $25 billion. CyberArk shareholders for each of their shares will get $45 cash and 2.2005 shares of Palo Alto. CyberArk, if you are not aware, creates identity software tools that grant employees access to platforms and applications. In my experience, it is a pain in the arse, frankly, but it does provide incredible security benefits. I mean, when it's implemented very broadly in environment, it can be quite a blocker, and you just have to get used to it and kind of figure out how to work with it. But Palo Alto Networks intends to use the deal to officially penetrate the identity security market and improve its offering for customers. A quick reminder for those out there that Microsoft Visual Studio 2015 is end of life on October 14, 2025, which you may recognize as the same date that Windows 10 end of support arrives too. So easy to remember. Nvidia shared that they plan to continue Windows 10 game-ready driver support for all GeForce RTX GPU chips to October 2026, a year beyond the operating system's end of life, to ensure users continue to receive the latest day zero optimizations for new games and apps, which is interesting because there are a lot of gamers still using Windows 10, although I believe the gaming community has mostly moved to Windows 11 now, but still, it's a pretty sizable community. OpenAI is reportedly working on a new plan called Go, which would be cheaper than the existing $20 plus subscription. It is speculated it could cost between $10 to $15, but it appears this is all just speculation right now. So if $20 a month is too expensive for your tastes, there may be a cheaper option coming in the future. NeoWind.net has reported that Anthropic has announced release of Cloud Opus 4.1, a new flagship model that delivers minor improvements over the current Opus 4 model. Anthropic claims that Opus 4.1 performs better than Opus 4 on agentic tasks, real-world coding, and reasoning. Opus 4.1 posted a state-of-the-art coding performance of 74.5% on benchmark testing. On agentic terminal coding, it scored 43.3%, up from Opus 4's 39.2%. Developers can now access Opus 4.1 for the same price via the cloud paid plan and in-cloud code. It is also available via Anthropic's developer API, Amazon Bedrock, and Google Cloud's Vertex AI. Anthropic recommends everyone switch to Opus 4.1 for better performance at the same price. GitHub announced that Opus 4.1 is now available in GitHub Copilot for Enterprise and Pro Plus plans, and developers can select this model in GitHub Copilot chat on github.com, Visual Studio Code, and GitHub Mobile. It is important to note that Opus 4.1 will be available only in Ask mode, and the older Opus 4 model will be deprecated in 15 days. GitHub mentioned that Opus 4.1 delivers notable performance gains in multi-file code refactoring when compared to the older Opus 4 model. So it seems like there's a lot of reasons why it's worth making this switch. Anthropic says it has revoked OpenAI's access to the Cloud API after ChatGPT's engineers were found using Cloud's coding tools. Cloud Code has become the go-to choice for coders everywhere, according to Anthropic spokesperson. And so it was no surprise to learn OpenAI's own technical staff were also using their coding tools ahead of the launch of GPT-5. It's unclear how OpenAI engineers were using Cloud Code, but it's possible it was used to improve GPT-5's coding capabilities. GPT-5 is expected to launch next week with auto and reasoning modes. So the way I interpret this is it's like a preemptive strike that if people are impressed with GPT-5's code, they may actually relate it to Anthropic because, they were using Anthropic for developing this. But we'll see. The New York Times has a pretty crap article, frankly, claiming gone are the days when Google, Apple, Meta, and Netflix were the dream destinations for tech workers, claiming they were offering fat salaries, lush corporate campuses, and say anything, do anything cultures. Now, the behemoths are large bureaucracies, and while many of them still provide free food and pay well, they have little compunction cutting jobs, ordering mandatory office attendance, and clamping down on employee debate. They went on to claim that it is the shut up and grind era. Look, you can definitely track the lack of some perks to COVID. I mean, if you follow this podcast, you remember me kind of reporting that there were companies making changes to funding for certain perks, but a lot of those perks were very office-centric. And it kind of made sense. It's like, well, if you're supporting people to work from home, you don't need to have, gym access in the building or like playrooms or whatever in the office. Maybe use that space a little more effectively and support the remote work. Now, obviously, people are coming back to the office and those perks are no longer there. And, for the last, 3 or 4 years now, maybe 3 years, there has been mass layoffs in the tech industry. So it's a time of, hold on to your job and be thankful you have it, or at least that's the way it's being interpreted. And people are just like, well, yeah, they're cutting all these benefits and making morale worse, knowing that people can't go to another job. But while, it's kind of true, this isn't like it's like a sudden thing, right? This happened when the bubble burst in the 2000s. The 2008 collapse as well saw mass layoffs, hiring freezes, and perks being stripped away. For me, I'm in my 40s. private pensions when switching jobs just became something you were not offered anymore. People that are like my parents' age or my father and mother-in-law, they had private pensions in the jobs that they'd worked for 25 plus years, and they're well taken care of. But those perks were stripped away after 2008 primarily. In the article, it documents someone who started at Google in 2007 and how cool the place was then. It was like, yeah, that's also before the 2008 collapse. I remember Google came to my college recruiting in 2005 or 2006, I believe, and they had also depicted how cool it was working for them. What my friends told me who went to work for them was that, yeah, they really do have bean bags with headphones and you could just like work and chill. But it's because they are working and under pressure working late. They have these spaces to try and keep people in the office and just kind of grind and work them. It's not necessarily a new thing. All that glitters is not gold. I'm sure some of the fancy office amenities will come back as people are forced into the office more permanently again, but it's not necessarily a good thing. And somewhat related, I saw Forbes also recently reported with allegations that some AI startups are instituting a 996 schedule, expecting employees to work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, under the guise of needing to work hard to be at the forefront of AI. Forbes acknowledges how misguided this is, as studies have shown overworked employees suffer from cognitive fatigue and diminished productivity. Additionally, a British study, for example, shows that employees who put in more than 11-hour workdays are 67% more likely to have a heart attack, and employees who work more than 54 hours a week are at higher risk of dying from karoshi. And karoshi, if you're not familiar, is a Japanese term because the Japanese work culture is quite different to, say, Ireland at least, and even the US, where I think the work culture is a little bit tougher than Ireland. But they have a really, really serious work mentality and work ethic. So people have actually died on the job. And I know it's not just unique to Japan. I can remember, I believe it was a Bank of America employee in the UK. He was a young guy, died while working crazy hours. No job is worth that. If you're at an AI startup and they're doing 996, leave, let them fail. It's not worth it. Anyway, that's my cynical, older perspective. If I was in my 20s, I'd probably be doing that kind of grind. I mean, I was putting in serious hours back then. I still kind of am. So I'm not one to preach. I'm a bit of a hypocrite saying that, but take care of yourselves, people. Put yourself first. WindSurf, a company almost acquired by OpenAI allegedly, but then lost its CEO, co-founder, and research. TechCrunch.com reported that WindSurf, a company almost acquired by OpenAI, but then lost its CEO, co-founder, and research leads to Google in a $2.4 billion deal known as a reverse acqui-hire, where Google hired the key talent rather than just buying the company, was ultimately got acquired by Cognition, and it appears to already be a jarring experience for the employees within just weeks of that acquisition. They are being offered the equivalent of 9 months of salary if they leave, and those who choose to stay. I know I've gone kind of long on this section, but I saw that TechCrunch.com also reported that WindSurf, a company almost acquired by OpenAI, but then who lost its CEO, co-founder, and research leads to Google in a $2.4 billion deal known as a reverse acqui-hire, where Google just hired the key talent rather than buying the company, ultimately got acquired by Cognition, and it appears within just weeks of that acquisition it has been a jarring experience for the 200 employees. They're very quickly being offered the equivalent of 9 months of salary if they leave, and those who choose to stay are reportedly being required to spend 6 days at the office and clock more than 80 hours per week. TechCrunch.com reported that Cognition CEO Scott Wu wrote in the email, quote, "We don't believe in work-life balance. Building the future of software engineering is a mission we all care so deeply about that we couldn't possibly separate the two." End quote. Oof. Ugh. Like I said, put yourself first. I think Gen Z is right on this one. Finally, on the news for this week, something lighter than that diatribe. Microsoft has announced an anniversary edition Croc, and they're currently available for pre-order for Microsoft employees who get first dibs ahead of worldwide launch. The Crocs in question are Windows XP themed, and I don't know if you're familiar with Crocs or not, but these little charms or trinkets that could be placed on them. They've got some like Windows XP themed ones, like they've got Clippy, for example. The shoes are apparently $80, which way too rich for my taste, but I also don't wear Crocs. So if you are that way inclined for wearing Crocs, then hey, more power to you, and maybe you'll like these XP Crocs. It looks like, though, that the Microsoft employees get first run at them, so you'll have to wait a while, I guess, until they're on general sale. But now this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. First up, Florence Salzman shared a blog post on mastering assignments in Intune, group targeting done right. And I certainly know from working in events over the last year that Intune and the users and community is growing ever larger. So this should interest many of you out there. And finally, I saw that ControlUp is promoting AVD Tech Fest, which is going to be in Berlin this September, and you can register now. So it's going to be September 10th and 11th. Well, that's it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening.